Okay, welcome to Modern Mainframe DevOps KPIs, the key to a successful digital strategy, part 1, featured in the Share recording room. My name is Spencer Hallman. I'm from Compuware, and our speaker today is Bill Mackey, also from Compuware. So before we begin, I'd like to mention, first of all, this session featured in this room are being recorded. If you are not interested in participating, please choose another session to attend. Good, no one left. Attendees do not have permission to record the content on personal devices. Only the contracted videographer with Share Association has permission to stream and record the content. This is a vendor presentation. Share management has approved it based on the recommendation and review by program management. The Share canons of conduct and policies will be followed in this session. Specifically, a speaker must not engage in sales activity, including direct or indirect solicitation. Your feedback and comments are very important to us, so please remember to fill out a session evaluation through the Share mobile app, QR code online, or at the kiosk located outside the session rooms. If there are any working members of the press in the audience, please be sure you have identified yourself to the speaker. Our speaker will be taking questions during the presentation. Please turn off all cell phones or place them in silent vibrate mode. Mute the sound on your laptops and follow the Share canons of conduct. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill.
I don't need that, thanks. Okay, thanks, Spencer. So as you can see by the name of the presentation, this is part 1 of a 2-part presentation about how mainframe DevOps KPIs can help you with development. So in part 2 of this presentation, Spencer and I are going to be switching roles, and he's going to be going into more detail about exactly how customers of ours and companies are actually using mainframe DevOps KPIs to help them drive development. So I'm going to be kind of the high level, and Spencer's going to be more the detail. And then the primary focus of my presentation is going to be based on some surveys that Gartner had done within the last year Forrester had done within the last year surrounding mainframe KPIs and their use. Spencer tells me I'm kind of the warm-up act for it, and he's the headliner, but I'll let you guys decide that. Okay. So before we begin, let me give you the reason that Spencer and I created this presentation. First of all, we've both been in the vendor world for over 20 years. I'm closer to 30, he's more like 20, so we'll say more than 20 years. And over the last 5 years, we've been product managers at Compuware. But just most recently, the last year and a half, we've had the unique opportunity to work on a free offering that's going to aid mainframe customers with KPIs and measurement. And what we've done is we've gone to lots of different dev managers and ops managers and had the opportunity to talk to them about how they're measuring their development teams and how they really get to know what good looks like. And what we found, not surprisingly, is that there's just a lot of gut feel out there as to what good is. Are we meeting our deadlines? If we are, that's good. Well, but we also found in talking to these companies is that the non-mainframe side of the house has a lot of tools and measurements in place to measure things like quality, velocity, and efficiency. So the disparity between the non-mainframe side of the house and the mainframe side of the house, along with this offering that we've been working on to do with measurement and KPIs, we found interesting, and we thought maybe you would too. So we'll share that with you today. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start discussing today the state of the union on the mainframe and give you my opinions. And next we'll kind of move into a discussion on what I call the need for speed, or velocity is what that does. And that'll lead us into a DevOps maturity discussion. And then finally, the meat of the presentation is surrounding a Forrester study around mainframe KPIs and why just measuring quality as a KPI or a quality KPIs isn't quite enough. And don't forget Spencer's part 2 presentations where he's going to go into some real insights as to how mainframe customers are using KPIs to drive business decisions. Okay, first of all, I want to congratulate IBM on a great quarter 2. I know nobody here doubts the viability of the platform, but results don't lie. For the 3rd straight quarter, IBM mainframe has delivered revenue growth. And not only congratulations to IBM, but everyone in here who participates with the platform. I know that I'm extremely proud of the part my company plays in keeping the platform healthy and alive. So congratulations on that. And this brought me to a quote that I loved, and this kind of sums up how I feel about the state of the mainframe. And if you guys aren't familiar with Christopher O'Malley, please link in with him or follow him on Twitter. He does a lot of great content almost daily. His quote is, "IBM's greatest shining star continues to be the IBM Z mainframe system hardware. IBM released 2018 Q2 earnings, and the IBM Z mainframe system hardware quarter revenue was up more than 112% year over year." That's right, 112%. It's like a startup company there. Once again, shameless mainframe naysayers are left eating crow while the engineering marvel that is IBM Z14 continues to exceed customer expectations in reliability, performance, security, and total cost of ownership in the digital age. So that's an awesome representation of how things are going in the mainframe space. Okay, so this is from the Forrester study in 2017, but in the next 2 years, this was about 100 different infrastructure and technology folks from different groups, and then in the next 2 years, will you be increasing or decreasing your use of the mainframe? And what we found was 85% said they would be either increasing or keeping about the same their use of the mainframe. So, and there are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, business critical applications have always run on the mainframe and will continue to do so. And we've got new applications such as containerization and blockchain that are starting to run on the mainframe. Turns out the mainframe is a really good platform for these workloads. Hence the combination of these two things, the IBM results. From the same 2017 study, survey, we saw that mainframe development is fairly in sync with other platforms like web and cloud and mobile. So here we ask, which types of development technologies are people working with? So mainframe's right in the mix, holding steady and not shrinking. So where should our focus be? Well, 72% of today's customer-facing applications are completely or very dependent on the mainframe processing, and we can't lose sight of that. The majority of all business-critical workloads are managed on the mainframe. As companies transform towards cloud deployment models, they'll continue to rely on the reliability, scalability, and security of the mainframe. And of course, companies have always had their systems of records, and they'll continue to integrate that with their systems of engagement. So once again, security, reliability, a factor there. And then new areas of focus. Well, I mentioned containers. So they're fast becoming the foundation of modern cloud computing. So mainframes are going to be are excellent for this area, and blockchain is another thing that is kind of being used a lot for financial transactions, and we know that mainframes are great for financial transactions, security, scalability, it's again great things. And the final thing there is machine learning. Over 90% of the data in the world today can't be Googled, and that's because the data is in private clouds and behind firewalls. So learning to use modern machine learning tools and being able to work with the data on the platform where it resides is extremely cost effective. Right? And I think Spencer's presentation is going to talk a little bit in detail about mainframe KPIs. And once again, machine learning can be incorporated there as well. Okay, in summary, companies are moving towards making sure that mainframe stays relevant, and they're doing that by tying their mainframes into DevOps initiatives. So many of the vendors at this conference provide tools that enable DevOps initiatives. So I highly recommend when you go to the vendor fairs, talk to the vendors, see what they've got out there, because there's a lot of great stuff. Mainframe development is subject to the same business demands as other development areas within our company. So we should be focusing on the same metrics that the rest of our company is focused on. And those metrics are quality, efficiency, and velocity. And finally, CIOs are results-oriented, not platform-oriented. So I think what we really need to be focused on is the customer experience. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about speed. According to Forrester, velocity has companies' full attention. And I'm not talking about mainframe companies. I'm talking about companies as a whole. Velocity is picking up, I should say, velocity is picking up a lot of speed. We'll go with that. So Forrester talked to development directors and managers and asked them, what's on your mind when it comes to delivery? How quickly can I, and what they found was, they asked questions like, how quickly can we get applications, update our applications? How quickly can you get quality changes in the hands of our users? And how frequently can I drive releases? Overall, people are extremely focused on velocity, but as it turns out, they're incredibly dissatisfied. 64% of businesses were incredibly dissatisfied with release velocity. So 64% of all the people surveyed. Now 42% were dissatisfied with manual approvals during releases. Now I don't know, that number seemed kind of low to me. I don't know what the other 58% of the people are thinking. Maybe they just don't know that there's other ways. So when we've been out, and Spencer and I have been out talking to customers, what we find is as far as moving things along the stage, the pipeline to be released, companies do things just the way they always have. They combine groups. They've got an awful lot of latency in the pipeline between when development is through and when we get to the release in the customer hands. So manual approvals is something I think we can work on. And finally, 66% are dissatisfied with automation tools. So this is interesting, automation tools. It's not that companies don't have automation tools. As a matter of fact, they all do. It's just that there's pockets of them throughout companies. You got Chef over here and Puppet over here and this other one over here. And companies don't know what to use. So this has been a problem for a lot of companies. So these kind of numbers kind of drive us into a DevOps maturity discussion. So when you look at the various verticals across there, manufacturing, retail, business, media, utilities, telecommunications, financial, and public and health, and you look at that down the left-hand side with a DevOps lens on culture and process, release velocity, and automation tools. When we talked to DevOps professionals, we found that certain verticals were better at this than others. So for example, we kind of see that utilities and telecommunications are a good bit further ahead of the game than, say, the public sector and healthcare. And there's some reasons for this. First of all, a lot has to do with governance and oversight. So, the public sector and healthcare are a little bit more limited. But just because we're more heavily regulated doesn't mean we can't be more mature in the DevOps space. As a matter of fact, financial services is extremely regulated, and they're right there alongside the utilities and telecommunications as far as maturity. Okay, so when we ask the DevOps professionals at companies to kind of rate themselves on a scale, on a DevOps scale, and we had them look at things like organizational units, trust level between organizational units, accountability, customer focus, collaboration, automation tools, metric, how they deal with their vendors. Those kinds of things is what they're rating themselves on. We find that most companies rate themselves in level 2 or level 3 in a DevOps maturity chart. And that's great. Level 5 would be like if we were talking national security, this would be the NSA. There's not a lot of level 5s, and there doesn't need to be a lot of level 5s. Most companies, as it turns out, just need to be one level better than they are today. And the way they're going to get there is by focusing on the right KPIs. And when I use the word KPIs, that's key performance indicators, things that are going to drive business decisions. So focusing on the right KPIs, putting the right automation tools in place, and then having their product teams leverage DevOps to its full potential. Those are the 3 areas that I think are most important in moving ourselves one to the right. Okay. So Compuware and Forrester did a study. This was back, I think, in February, if I'm not mistaken, that focused not solely on DevOps, but on DevOps within the mainframe specifically. And they wanted to know how people are using KPIs to help them with measurements and what they're measuring. So we asked them, what are you currently measuring? We asked shops, what are you currently measuring? And what do you think is important to be measuring? And finally, what business outcomes are these measurements driving? Because if we're using KPIs, key performance indicators, as measurements, and they're not driving business outcomes, changing the way we do business, or at least giving us some insights on how it might, then those aren't key. They're not key. They're not really key performance indicators. They're just interesting statistics. Okay, so what we did was we looked at we talked to 160 managers, mainframe decision makers, and developers throughout the US, UK, France, and Germany. And to be clear, we only used the results from people that were directly involved with the mainframe. So if other people responded that weren't mainframers, they weren't included in the studies. And what we saw is that most of the people that responded were from large and medium-sized companies. They've got mainframes, so that kind of makes sense. Mostly director level and management level, although we had 29% from the vice president C-level area. I mentioned where people were from, the US and UK, evenly split, mostly there. And this is kind of how they lumped themselves into the departments. Mostly people said they were IT, but there were some ops people, some apps, and enterprise architecture. So that's kind of the demographics of the people that were involved in the survey. Was I off one? Okay, there we go. All right, so we had 16 different industries that responded, which I thought was great. And when asked who was using Agile and who was using Waterfall as a development methodology, we found that 90% responded they were either using Agile or planning to move to it, which I thought was a big number. And then 10% said they were reducing, so that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But that 90% seems like a huge number to me. Now, as somebody who has been going into mainframe jobs, and Spencer, I'll ask you this question because you've been out there with me. What's your take on that 90% number? Does that seem correct to you?
I think a lot of the customers we've talked to have all been pretty much, waterfall. There are, a small subset of them that are agile and embracing DevOps and see the future as DevOps, but a lot of them are waterfall, looking to move to agile.
Right. I think that's so. I agree. And this survey showed 58% were using it today and expanding use. And what we're seeing is there might be one or two teams doing Agile in the mainframe space, but there's still another 20 that aren't. So we still got a long way to go. People are just dipping their toe in the water. Who here is doing Agile on the mainframe? I know the Compuware people are. Okay. And who here is Waterfall? You guys are starting to move that a little bit. So yeah, so what we're finding is even with the teams that are saying that they're using Agile, they're semi-Agile, what we call Agile fall. And I threw an extra slide in here, I'll show you in a second, that has to do with Agile fall because I found it funny to do. But the other interesting thing here is 37% said they're using Waterfall and either expanding or keeping the use about the same. So that's interesting. But either way, Agile is catching fire on the mainframe, and we're going to see that continue to increase. So you know your Agile fall if you've heard some statements like this. We have sprints, but they're 4 to 6 weeks long. Or we try to do most of the development at the beginning of the sprint and most of the testing at the end of the sprint. Let's see, is there any other good ones in there? Any of these ring a bell, David, with you in your organization when we first started out? Oh yeah, we demo our software and development to customers, but only after we're happy with it. And by then, by the time we get around to it, it's too late to do anything to change it. So anyhow, these were interesting things that I found. And I can remember when Compuware started, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, we fully cut the cord on one day and then just went, and it took us a little while, a couple of sprints worth, but now it's smooth sailing, so it's pretty good. Ring a bell. All right, current situation. So initially I had, who here's seen Jersey Shore? You guys know the situation, Mike Sorrentino. I had his picture up here, and our marketing crew said that wasn't allowed. He wanted to be paid for that, so I had to use this guy. I don't know who he is. But let's take a look at some of the more interesting statistics from the actual survey that we did. All right. Percentage of critical apps running on mainframes will increase. So 57% said that they're running business critical applications on the mainframe, and 64% said that they'll be running critical business applications in a year. So we're putting more emphasis on the mainframe and not just treating it as a stable platform. It's growing. 72% of the firms say their customer-facing applications are completely or very reliant on mainframe processing. Interesting. But firms have lost roughly a quarter of their mainframe workforce over the last 5 years, and 2/3 of those jobs aren't being or haven't been replaced. So we've got kind of a disparity there. Anyone see a problem with that? We've got all this increased mainframe, but we're seeing this kind of, and David, you guys used this slide in your presentation. And there's some other challenges. The number, we asked people, what challenges do you encounter when developing on the mainframe space? And we showed the top 10 here. But the number one challenge when developing on the mainframe is the difficulty in predicting quality outcomes. So it's not obviously not the only problem that people are facing, but again, I think using the right metrics and applying machine learning techniques could be the answer to some of these problems. Predicting better quality outcomes, for example. So, potential crisis loom. We got mainframe workload increasing. We've got processing customer-facing applications on the rise. But we see net loss of skilled mainframe workers, and there's other challenges going on. So how are we going to solve this problem? Well, I believe the answer to that is to become a lot more efficient, and using things like KPIs can help us there. Specifically, KPIs that measure efficiency. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but companies are really good at measuring quality. Okay? They look at things like, how many bugs do we have? How much automation do we have? But they aren't focused as much on things like efficiency and quality, and we think that's important. So if we have more to do with less, then we need to be laser focused and be more efficient. So let's talk a little bit about KPIs. Let's see what the Forrester Compuware study shows and tells us about metrics. When we asked mainframers what's important to measure, they overwhelmingly said application quality, and there's no surprise there. Velocity and efficiency were important, but deemed to be less critical. So quality first, velocity and efficiency second in the survey. We see this extended. We see this extended further when we asked what measurements they're currently measuring. We see that a third of the companies aren't typically measuring velocity and efficiency. So Spencer, here's another good one for you. The numbers, people say 73% measuring quality, 63 velocity, 61 efficiency. Are you seeing those kind of measurements when we talk to mainframe customers out there?
Definitely seeing the quality. I think velocity and efficiency is something new to the people, at least that we've been talking to.
Yeah, I suspect when people took this survey, they thought, well, we measure how often we do releases. We release quarterly or, in some cases, yearly on the mainframe. And that's a measurement, but it's not really driving us to be more efficient or faster in getting things to customers. Quality is a lot easier to measure, and that's kind of why. We can look at automated testing. We can look at bugs. We can look at add-ins, those kinds of things, pretty simple. But I think what we need is we need to have this more balanced as we move more into a DevOps world where velocity is more important. So having velocity and efficiency balance out with quality is critical. Okay. To what extension has the reduction in mainframe workers negatively impacted efficiency, velocity, and application? The survey shows that application quality and development velocity take a more immediate hit today, and efficiency a little bit further down, a little bit further away. I would have thought this would have been a little more even if speed and velocity, or if we have less people and speed and velocity are a problem, we need to get more efficient to make things work. When asked specifically about which KPIs they would find valuable. It's no surprise that the top things kind of revolved around quality, like managing defects. Customers want to deliver a quality customer experience in a speedy manner. But if they're only focusing on one area, by balancing out these KPIs, because the bottom ones are more to do with efficiency. See, things like mean time to change approval, mean lead time. These are things like how quickly does it take me to get a good idea from the idea stage, when somebody first writes up an enhancement, how long does it take before that gets into development? Is it sitting in backlogs? Are good ideas sitting around for 6, 8, 10 weeks, a month, a year, whatever it might be? And then on the other side, once development's completed, how long does it take us to get it out to our customers? You know, what's that? How much latency is in that pipeline? Right? So those are more efficiency kinds of things that really aren't being measured. So we're going to kind of show you what we've gone out to customers. We're going to show you in Spencer's presentation the actual KPIs that we landed on that we think would give a good balance to quality, efficiency, and velocity, and show you what customers are doing and how they're using those in their shops to drive business decisions. When asked what technical benefits people expected to receive on measuring KPIs, the top vote getters once again revolved around quality, higher application quality, and higher performance of applications were the two top vote getters. But strangely enough, they didn't expect reduction in customer discovered defects. I found that really interesting, that we want to measure these things, and quality is something we expect, but we don't really expect to see a reduction in customer defects. When asked what business benefits they expected to get around KPIs, we see a lot of what we'd expect: better customer experience, increased speed to market, and being better able to respond to demands. But what really caught my attention was when I put these slides side by side, and people say they want to focus on a better customer experience as number one in the business benefits, but reduction in customer discovered defects is the last thing in the technical benefits. Those seems a little bit at odds to me, at odds. And the same thing with speed to market and some of the things down below. A greater velocity of application delivery is low. So what this is telling me is that the business benefits that people are expecting aren't in tune with the KPIs that they're measuring. So Spencer's going to go into detail on how we do this and how to better do this in part 2 of the presentation. Okay, to sum it up, the biggest focus on people's minds when it comes to measuring KPIs is around defects and quality, but to remain competitive in a DevOps world, companies need to balance quality, efficiency, and velocity. Measuring the right KPIs will lead to a balance and allow you to drive business performance. If you focus just on the quality KPIs, business will suffer. Okay. All right, so we need to focus on the metrics that matter, and Spencer's going to show you what's worked for several companies that we've worked with in part 2. But I'll give you a hint here. To succeed in a digital age, firms need to manage increasing workloads with fewer workers. We've already seen that, and bring greater focus to velocity and efficiency, and not just quality. So currently we've got a lot of focus on defects, quality, and that's fine. But things like that cycle time, how long is it taking me to take from this point when development's done to get it out to our customers? In most of the shops we've seen, that time is enormous. Approval time, red tape, QA. If we can automate some of this and get things out quicker, I mean, there's shops out there like the Googles of the world that are moving things or releasing multiple times a day, hundreds of times a day. So as a mainframe company, we've got to get better at cycle time. Mean time to resolution. Right? We find a problem in production, a bug. How long does it take us to fix it and get it back out into production? That should be the developers themselves, on average, taking them a couple of hours to fix a bug. Yet it's still taking us weeks, if not months, to get these fixes back out to customers. And lead time as well. How long between when a good idea comes up before we get it worked on? How long is it sitting in our backlogs? Right? Those are big problems that we should be focusing on. Measuring the right KPIs, focus on metrics that drive technical performance. Things like delivery of how many features are we delivering in our releases? availability of applications, automation. Are we doing code coverage, test automation? And finally, the right KPIs drive business performance. Measuring quality, velocity, and efficiency means greater speed to market and a better customer experience. All right, so please return after lunch, where Spencer's going to go into more detail on how customers are using KPIs and can really impact the way that you do your business. Questions? Yeah.
Talk a lot about measurement.
Yeah.
Do you have a solution?
Yeah, so what we do, you've got tools out there like you've got your SCMs, all right? There's Compuware has ISPW, there's Endeavor, there's any number of different SCM tools out there, right? And these tools have got ways that you can do extracts or exports of certain features, like how often are we doing releases? That would come out of your SCM. And how many features are we delivering? How many applications are we impacting? Those kinds of things can be extracted into a CSV file and then put into open source dashboards. And that's where I start talking about machine learning a little bit, because once you've got these data points like information from your SCM, who here uses Jira or something like Jira? Right, some kind of what we call ITSMs. These are tools where we put our tickets in that tells how long is development taking, how many bugs are we fixing, how many enhancements are we doing, how many questions are being asked. Those kinds of tickets can be exported too into CSVs, along with data points from the tools you're using. Right, so if you're using a whole bunch of different vendor tools, you can do extracts from those as well. We get that into an open source dashboard, and we've used things like the Elk Stack. Then you've got a tool like Kibana that can give you details about here's what this team's doing, and here's what that team's doing, and here's what this team's doing, and why is this team being more efficient than that team? And then as a development manager, you can look at those things and say, oh, well, they're using these tools and they're not. You might want to start have them talk to each other. So by taking different data points, putting them into modern toolings like Elk and things like that, you can come up with some really nice dashboards that can show you these things.
The biggest issue I see in development is discipline. I work as a consultant. I go to a lot of different companies, and everywhere it's the same term, agile-ish.
Agile fall?
Yeah, agile fall, agile-ish.
Yeah.
I see it everywhere. They adopt those portions of agile that they like. It's usually up to the PM. The discipline of the story, 2-week time frame, the scrums, it just falls apart.
Really?
It always just seems to fall apart.
Good. David, can I ask you David Rizzo's a VP of development, so he's seen these he's had to deal with things within his team. Can you give him some indication of how you've made some of your teams that maybe were less performing, better performing teams? What kind of techniques have they done to improve?
There's no easy answer. First of all, that's the obvious answer. But some of the things that we did was to make sure that we're talking about metrics, we're talking about having measurements. We do things to look across all the teams of what does good look like, and different teams, how are they being successful? And that's by looking at some of the metrics of the output of, when you talk about agile, the number of, whether it's story points or stories or tasks, whatever it might be that they get done, because each team does it slightly different, but having metrics for them to measure by and over time, so that they have something to strive for to improve. And for us, we had the whole entire organization. We went to Agile at one time, so there was no going backwards. Everybody had to do it, and they all had to figure out how to get it done. So that helped because they learned from each other. There was no option to say, I want to do something different. And then giving them the tools that they need to be able to do it, sometimes them coming up with new tools that they need, and being able to change as they go, set how each team works, and then letting them work towards that, but ultimately having goals. We did things of setting delivery objectives to meet the needs of our customers. So we gave them goals to strive for and then let them build behind that to how they can achieve that and then measure how well they were achieving that. Things on the quality, how efficient they were, and the velocity of being able to get things done.
So you took a really strong management approach and basically dictated whether you use this tool, this tool, this tool, but we're doing this methodology. And
Yes.
in a lot of places, I don't really see that. I don't see the discipline needed.
Right, that the executive sponsorship starting from the top and saying this is what you need to do. It's like anything that you do. If there's a fallback, the easy way, I always say it's the old pair of comfortable shoes in the closet. You can always go back to it, but it's not the best thing for you. And by having everybody do it at once, they were able to work together to move forward.
I guess executive sponsorship is key.
It is,
It's essential.
for sure. Yeah, for us, it was top down. And I mean, I can't tell you now, we're getting exponentially more innovation out the door than we were 3-4 years ago. Just, 10x. So it takes a little time, but it's doable. We promise you that. Any other thoughts on metrics, KPIs? What are people measuring? Anyone out there measuring anything that they find interesting? Are you measuring things like how long it takes a story from the time it gets created till it's closed, till it's ended? And are we happy with the timings that it's taking for those kinds of things? Matt, I know you've seen some of these measurements, right? But it's interesting when you look at these things with a hard lens and say, we came up with this really great idea and it's in the product now and our product's taken off because of it. Why didn't we? That idea was created 2 years ago. Why is it just now getting there? What happened? Why did it sit there? Why did it not get the support? Why didn't it get out of someone's backlog? What did we do instead of that? And how do we learn from that mistake if that indeed was a mistake? Those are the things that we're measuring in our sprint retrospectives, and development managers like David are taking a hard look at and saying, okay, we fixed that bug on Thursday, but it took us, it was 2 weeks later that we got it out to the customer. Why didn't we get it out to them on Friday or Thursday afternoon? What's slowing us down? And there's some good things that are slowing. There's some good reasons not to, but there's also some wait and see in there. And we want to measure those things, know about them, and get better over time. That's what the right KPIs will do for you. They'll let you actually change the way you do business. Okay. Thank you all. Come back.